What you focus on is what gets magnified.
Yes.
That is what you bring into the world. That is what you manifest. If you're focused on the fear, that is going to be what comes through. Even if you think you're trying to do it with good intentions.
Welcome to the Feminine Alchemy Podcast, where we explore the truth about the feminine, the peaceful, the wild, and the visceral. I'm your host, Jaye Anne, joined by my co-hosts, Julie Dean Richards and Kayelee Rose. Each week, we explore the deep mysteries of the feminine and help listeners apply them to their daily lives in a practical way. Join us to unlock the hidden wisdoms your soul has been waiting for. I'm Jaye Anne, and I'm here with Jocelyn Pedersen, and we're going to talk about Halloween and the witch wound and why people have a problem with Halloween and how we can really access that power without it being like, oh, it's a scary, terrible thing.
And for those people who aren't familiar with me yet, I'm also the woman in the wilderness on YouTube and social media. Jaye Anne and I have become really good friends, talking about things from similar perspectives, but also really different backgrounds. I have a religion that I'm very much faithfully a part of. And Jaye Anne, you're not affiliated with any particular religion, right?
No, I grew up non-denominational Christian,
Mhm.
and I was very sheltered because I was homeschooled and I was in the Christian private school for many, many years. So as I grew up, it just wasn't for me.
And that's awesome. I love that we can come at this from these different perspectives because it's not like I don't want to come here and like bash on anybody in this conversation per se. But what's concerning to me and why we're having this conversation is because I do see a lot of things coming from either the Christian community or my own faith tradition, the LDS faith tradition, particularly around Halloween, now even around Christmas time. It's that time of year where I think a lot of people who are like Western Christian of that mentality worry, is this bad? Like, is Halloween bad? Is this something I just shouldn't do? So I want to acknowledge some of the legitimate fears that people do have around Halloween and then why maybe the way that we talk about it and approach it isn't the healthiest or the best way and what we can actually do that is helpful and good and in alignment with what we believe, right?
I just want to bring up this reel that I saw recently that really solidified exactly what we're talking about here. And it was this guy who was like, oh, you're Christian and you believe and you celebrate Halloween. And then it was cut to another, and here's why you shouldn't, basically. And it was all these people are sacrificed, just all this human sacrifice on Halloween, all this other stuff. And I couldn't finish watching it because it was just so full of horrific concepts and imagery that I was like, okay, I have to close that and put it away. But I recognize like that's what we're going to talk about is like the reason why people don't like Halloween is like because of the dark, scary, yucky stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a real power that you can tap into that isn't actually related to that. So that's really what we wanted to get into.
Yeah, I think you'd have to be naive to say people don't do bad things on Halloween. They do. But I think the question is, why do they do bad things on Halloween? Do you have any insights into that? Is there something astrologically or spiritually significant to that thing?
You have to go back to the wheel of the year, the witch's wheel of the year. When I say witches, I don't mean evil people who are doing terrible things. I mean people who are land oriented, who are connected to the land, who have a strong connection to the cycles of
Mm-hmm.
physical reality. And that has a lot to do with the equinoxes and the solstices. What Samhain is, which is the other word for Halloween, what Samhain is one of those midpoints between the fall equinox and the winter solstice or Yule. When we do that, we're thinning the veil. I mean, we're not doing anything. The veil just sort of thins during that time.
Mm-hmm.
The veil thins in the spring too. So at Beltane, which is May 1st, that's the midpoint between the spring equinox and the summer solstice, it thins then too. So you think of different traditional things that happen in May, that May Day concept, and there's a lot of purification traditions around that time frame because we're going from dark to light. And now we're going from light to dark, and we've passed the midpoint of the equinox, and we're getting into that part where we're into the darker part, literally, right? The sun is gone. So when we're looking at Halloween or Samhain, we're looking at, yes, the veil is thin, and at the same time, we're moving towards darkness. And that darkness isn't about evil, it's about going within. It's about understanding what's under the surface. It's about connection to the earth. It's about celebrating ancestors, because who's in the earth but our ancestors? So we're really, really focused in on the unknown and the dive into the unknown. And if you ever heard me or anyone talk about the heroine's journey, you have to go into the unknown in order to come out the other side as this fully embodied feminine figure. So what we're doing really, when we demonize Halloween in the first place, when we just say it's a bad thing and we should never, we are first of all ignoring half of ourselves. We're ignoring the feminine. We're ignoring the deep dive. We're demonizing the stuff that scares us about ourselves. And we're calling those things demons, which is what we're really, really worried about. The reason why it's this one specifically creates the problem is because we're moving towards the darkness in the solstice concept.
Yeah, the darkness language, which is something that I'm going to address at the summit that
Yeah,
we're doing on Halloween, because so much of that language has been corrupted and has been used to create fear so that we don't actually explore our own inherent spirituality. But I just
correct.
wanted to share something cool that my mom made up. And it's all these different days all over the world in different cultures that are similar to Halloween or All Hallows Eve or All Saints Day, that kind of a thing. My understanding is that it's like Dia de los Muertos. People are kind of more familiar with that because of Coco. So it is a tradition that is handed down where you do celebrate the dead, or you remember or memorialize those who are on the other side of the veil. And like you said, the veil is thin, so you can connect with them more easily. I don't know where the idea of it being thin comes from, other than I have heard that it's like, well, the light is literally longer, like especially in the fall, the sun is lower, so there's red light. And so it's literally like longer rays of light that penetrate more deeply, which I think is really interesting, that connection between actual light and spiritual light. But let's see. So there's Dia de los Muertos, All Souls Day, it's Spanish and Mexican. In Japan, there's Obon or Obon. That actually, interestingly, happens more in July or August, but it is based on the lunar calendar. So it's the 15th day of the seventh month of the lunar calendar. So it's that significant. In China, there's something called Qingming, if I'm saying that right. And that's based on the solstice. And like you said, in Ireland, that there's Samhain, Cambodia, Chunben. It's a 15-day, again, something to do with 15. They're a 15-day celebration in the 10th month of their lunar calendar. And then just a lot of them all throughout Latin America that are similar. And then even in the US, I find it interesting because we have Memorial Day, which is not based on anything astrological, but I think it kind of takes the place for us culturally of All Saints Day, because All Saints Day has kind of turned into Halloween. And so we have this significant event that happened where a lot of people died. And originally it was just going and decorating the graves of soldiers. And now it's turned into just memorializing or remembering all of our dead, because I think there is this natural need culturally to do that, to connect with those on the other side of the veil. And I think it's really unfortunate that we've turned this idea of connecting with people on the other side of the veil into, oh, it's all scary and it's all, weirdness and strange. And so we actually teach ourselves that connecting with the dead is bad and evil, which is weird because in my faith tradition, if anybody should totally be in alignment with this, it's us, because we do this practically every day. We go to our temples and we do a ritual for ourselves. And then after you do it for yourself, every time you go back to the temple, which is pretty regular for most LDS people, you're doing it for the dead. You're always doing it for somebody on the other side of the veil. You're helping them to heal and reconnect with God. So this should not be weird for LDS people at all, or controversial. It's in the Bible, actually. Paul talks about being baptized for the dead, but we've lost a lot of these things over time. But I just wanted to point out, this has been going on forever. It's not bad.
And it's not, yeah, and it's not isolated to a specific type of people. People originating in Asia, right? they didn't create this with a concept of Satan. They didn't do that because there was we should do sacrifices to. There's nothing about that. It is literally, there is a recognition that we need to reconnect with those who have gone before us. We need to reconnect with the land spirits. We need to reconnect with any of that. And that there is a time to do it every year. And we need to just stay in rhythm with that so that we can. I mean, there's a lot of benefits to it, but there's also like just feeling like you're not alone, like as a person. That's a
Mhm.
big one. But it's also going, okay, this person, if I knew them in life, maybe they weren't very nice to me, but they can now on the other side see kind of a different perspective and can kind of understand in a different way. And that can be communicated. Or I can communicate like, no, I didn't really like you in life. And then thanks, glad, hope you're having a good time after, but this is not for me. Those kinds of things keep our energies going in a way.
Whereas fear impedes all of that. From a Christian understanding, God is love. Perfect love casts out fear.
Yes.
And it says in John, if the person who has fear has torment, God and fear don't coexist. So, okay, so let's say we're acknowledging this is a spiritually powerful time of year, just like in the spring. There's similar energies going on. You have a choice. You can either opt into the fear or you can opt into the power of love. So, can we talk just for a minute, Jayan, about some of our experiences with fear around this and what that looks like, and maybe how that might not be the best way to do?
So when I was a young kid, like I said, I grew up in a non-denominational Christian church, and we weren't allowed to go trick-or-treating because that was evil. Or at least that was the perception, that we were participating in an evil behavior if we were going to go knock on people's doors and dress up like anything at all. We could dress up as like animals or Bible characters, and we would go to church. So one year I was an angel, another year I think my brother was like a tiger. I was Esther one year. And one year I actually was the Bible. My dad built me a whole box. He's an architect, so he's very good with cardboard. So I
Awesome.
had this whole box costume, and it was just the Bible. But sometimes, how being a parent, sometimes you're running late or whatever. And I remember we're trying to get ready for this Joy Jamboree is what they called it. And are in the back of our home, and there's people knocking on our door. We've turned off all the lights so we're hoping people don't think we're home. And it was just a very scary thing. Like, oh my gosh, people are knocking on our door and we don't know them. And they're participating in an evil activity, right? So that's what I was told. This is a terrible thing to do.
Yeah.
And I'm hiding in the back, and my mom's just like painting whiskers on my brother, and he's probably like 2 years old. And I was like, what is going on? And she's like, well, some people celebrate Halloween, and we don't do that. We go to church instead. But there was never an explanation of why am I afraid. And then, of course, at church, they would have these little booklets they'd hand out. And they would have demons all over it and say, oh, it's, it's,
Great.
this is what they're doing. They're doing demon things. Don't be part of the demon experience and play this trick-or-treating game. There was a lot of fear. And what it did, though, it served to keep me from being okay with people who were different than me. It served
Mhm.
really well in keeping me from being afraid of the outside world. And that was not a beneficial thing at all, is to say literally everyone is doing this and they're all evil.
Yeah, that's very much, I think, some of the problem. So, when you try to connect more with God and to be more in alignment with God, sometimes what we do is we double down on some of what I consider to be the masculine versions of spirituality and religion, which is very black and white. It's very cut and dry. And so the downside of that is that, yeah, what you do is actually find yourself more in a place of judgment of other people, and you disconnect more. I have to separate myself out even more. That's a very masculine thing, separation, individualism. But those can be good or bad. But in this case, I think it goes to an extreme that's just not healthy. And so we find new ways of judging people rather than connecting and reaching out in love. Growing up, I didn't have that kind of experience. We celebrated Halloween. It was fine, no big deal. But as I started to waken up more and more spiritually, and I learned more and more, and I'm studying Hebrew so I can know the Bible better. I mean, I'm just learning so much. And these people that I'm interacting with are posting things, right? And some of them were people that actually I helped, in my other life. What I do is I help people get off psych meds. And so they're like, "Hey, we know you're a good person, but these things are really evil." And so they would send me videos about things like yoga or Halloween from Christians. One girl was, I believe, a Wiccan at one point. She grew up Christian, she became a Wiccan, and she had this really creepy experience one time in her home with something spiritual going on, and that freaked her out. So she goes back to her, religious roots, and she is like talking about how I'll never even touch sage. I won't even cook with sage now. And I'm not making fun of her. I get what I'm saying is I get this because I know
Yes.
what it's like. So she's going back to her religious roots, right? So she's at some kind of a revival or whatever you call it, and they're casting things out. And this woman is staring at her, and she's like, "You've got a demon." And she's like, "No, I already dealt with all that. I healed it." And she's like, "No, you've got a demon." And she's just staring and staring and staring and staring at her until finally she's like, "And then guess what happened?" Yeah, she starts climbing up the wall and things like that. Well, yeah. And I think that's kind of the point that we're trying to get to here. What you focus on is what gets magnified.
Yes.
That is what you bring into the world. That is what you manifest. If you're focused on the fear, if you're focused on evil spirits and demons, yeah. If you're in a room full of people where they're all talking about demons or you're handing out pamphlets with images of demons, that is going to be what comes through. Even if you think you're trying to do it with good intentions, I think it's interesting. And when LDS people go on missions, oftentimes what'll happen is you'll have missionaries from America, like the US, who go to South America and Latin America or Africa. And they will see like the craziest things that they have never seen before. They will see demonic possessions and things like that we just don't really experience here that much. And there's this really cool story by this guy. He was a leader in the church. His name was F. Enzio Boucher. I don't remember what his role was, but he shares this story about like how he was kind of new there. He gets this call from a local leader. Hey, these missionaries went to help somebody. They went to cast out a demon, in the name of Jesus, like we do. And now it's like attacking this missionary. And so he's like, well, what do I don't know what to do. It's not like we're really trained other than like raise your hand and say in the name of Jesus Christ. So he's going over there and he's like shaking. He's just so scared. He doesn't know what to do because he doesn't know what to do. And he's praying. And as he gets there, all of a sudden it's like he has this vision, this understanding of how kind of silly it all is. It just becomes ridiculous to him. And as he's walking and he's just filled with this love. And all he does is he walks up to this missionary, embraces him, and says, "I love you, elder." And boom, it's gone.
Yeah.
That healed it. Why? Why does that work?
Nothing can exist in the presence of love except love.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we're obsessed with, evil, if we're worried about evil, we're actually opening a little portal
Yeah.
to letting that in. And really what we need to do is just clarify everything with divine love. If you shine your fullest, brightest self, nothing can attack that because it will be transformed as it comes into that
Yes.
space of love.
And that's the word. That's the key word is transformed. I think sometimes, especially like in countries where they do tend to be more Catholic or have those kinds of traditions, there is a lot of focus on, quite frankly, that I have seen on fear, on those kinds of things, and casting out. And I think
Yeah.
casting out is a bit of a problem because
Yep.
what you're doing is you're still trying to like, ooh, get that away from me. This is bad. I'll share an experience that I share in my book as well.
I love the
So,
story.
you know this story? Yeah.
Hmm.
So
It's wonderful.
yeah, so I'm having like a spiritual awakening. I'm healing from like a massive injury, like a neurological full on body injury. I'm doing kundalini. I'm doing these things that are like way outside my comfort zone in my religion. But I was getting to the point where spiritually I could see like some people call them dark entities. Again, the word darkness, I don't want to use that because I feel like that's problematic because darkness isn't necessarily bad. But I will say that these were maybe evil spirits or spirits with like heavy energy and kind of obscure. So it's like I would see with my eyes and it was like there was something kind of in the way there that looked like
Hmm.
a mist of darkness to me. And so I would just kind of like cast them out and whatever. It really wasn't a big deal. But one night I had this tablet next to my bed on the floor that I hadn't used in weeks. It hadn't been plugged in for at least several weeks. So there's no way this thing should have had any power. And it starts going off like some alarm. I'm like, I didn't even know this thing had an alarm. Like, what is that? It's in the middle of the night. My husband somehow sleeps through it. I don't know how. So I get up. I'm trying to like turn this thing off, but I can't turn it off because it was never on. And so I'm like really freaked out, right? So
That's
there you have the beginnings.
crazy.
There's fear. That was like
Yeah.
fear. And so finally, somehow I get it to shut off, go back to bed. And like early in the morning, I see this huge entity over me. So I go to cast it out like I normally would, but I can't because I'm seized all of a sudden like this. I can't move. I can't talk. I'm like, okay. So I'm thinking through scriptures, and there's a story like that in the Book of Mormon, like Alma, where he calls on Jesus, like, save me from this destruction. Joseph Smith had a similar experience. So I'm doing that in my mind, like, save me. And then it comes into my mind. So I do call on Jesus. And then in my mind, I think about, oh, this is like my neurological injury when I have sleep paralysis. What do I do for sleep paralysis? Well, I slow down my heart rate. I take a deep breath, and then I decided to do Ho'oponopono. So I do this central channel breath from up above all the way down to my toes. I calm down and I say, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. And as soon as I start to say, I love you, it was like, bam, it had dissipated. I couldn't even think the word I love you before it had dissipated. Now, I thought at the time I had cast it out. But what I learned as I was tutored more by the Spirit through revelation is I didn't cast out, it healed. Whatever that was converted to the light.
I wanna make a distinction because you touched on it a minute ago, but I wanna make a distinction between darkness and things that are used to control others. Because really that's what the evil
Yes.
is
Yeah.
about controlling others and ignoring autonomy, usurping people's own choices, autonomy, existence. So when we think about, like, possession, we're
Yeah.
actually thinking about actual, "I'm gonna control your body, you don't get a say." But
Yeah.
even when we're thinking about like, "Oh, I'm seeing the presence of a spirit that bothers me, that makes me nervous," that's fear, and we're gonna take action based on that too. So, one of the things though that we need to be very mindful of is that it's actually incredibly rare for it to be an external thing.
Mm.
It's more likely the presence of an energy, not a disembodied spirit per se, but just I'm entering into a phase of life. That's an energy. I'm entering into this phase of life. I'm doing these things and they're a little scary. We're going to come up against our subconscious fears and our own shadow before we come up against actual external things. And what we need to not do is be afraid of our own shadow in the
Yeah.
first place. And that's what we need to integrate. So when we transmute with love, like you just said you did,
Mhm.
we can do that for our own shadow and for external beings. So, either way, reaching for divine love and surrender to, I don't know what to do with this,
Mhm.
and something needs to happen, but I don't know what,
Yeah.
that's going to change the needle.
Yeah. That reminds me too of another person who reached out in this discussion group, is kind of LDS based. And she said, I don't like going to my in-laws' house because all their neighbors have up all of these decorations, these Halloween decorations. I hate it at Halloween. She's like, I dread it, I think was the words. And so she asked for advice. And so the thing I said is, okay, there's a difference between saying that's not something I would choose to engage in, especially because some of it is very fearful. It is supposed to be kind of scary. And I'm not going to engage in that really, that aspect of Halloween. I put up fall decorations. I love those things. But yeah, maybe the fear based stuff. I said, but there's a difference between that and dreading it, right? And being like, it's like, even if the people have bad intentions, they can't really harm you if you know how to live in love and walk in grace. It really can't touch you. So I asked her, so what is it in you that feels that way, that is triggered in that way? Because there's something, if it didn't resonate with some kind of fear or trauma in you, it wouldn't even be an issue. Like me, if I were to come across that, it just wouldn't be a big deal. But so let's deal with that.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
reflection of you usually. Or like you said, it's something coming from within. Like even in my book, when I talk about mists of darkness, I'm like, well, they're kind of without, but they're kind of within. It's tricky. But
I remember a time where I was going through a very, very scary time. And I never go to those haunted houses things, like those caves where like zombies chase you. Like, not for me. Nope. Thanks. Have a nice day. You enjoy, but it's not for me.
yeah.
But this time I did. This time I went to, it was a haunted house and it was intense. They don't touch you, but they were there jumping out. And I am very bad with jump scares. Like anyone can jump scare me with very little effort. Very little effort.
Good to know
I
because I'm totally gonna use that in the no, just kidding.
awesome. I went to this haunted house and I screamed so much. And when I came out, I was a different person, right? The screaming transforms. Like when we don't use our voices very often and we are often afraid of our own voices and to feel that much terror and scream it out, that's a huge deal. That's sort of like a friend of mine uses roller coasters as a way to deal with energy work and working through that in a screaming way and doing that. Like there is something really powerful and that we can do to transform our own fear and terror out of our bodies. So if something like that is triggering, you can scream it out. It is okay to like also feel the fear and let it bubble up and rise up. Because a lot of times we go, oh, I don't want to experience fear. It's evil to have fear. I'm going to just not look at it. That's fine for a time, but eventually you may need to look at it, feel the fear, and then eventually you won't even be afraid of it anymore.
Yeah, facing your fears. I mean, that's a huge part of OCD therapy, which I have done with
Mm,
3 of my kids now. The more you try to avoid it, the worse it's gonna get. So you actually have to, like, face it head on, so we expose them to something that is, like, the most terrifying thing they could be exposed to. That is the therapy. So that makes so much sense. So I actually love that idea because I actually don't get it why some people love Halloween so much. I'm like, "I don't get it." But actually, I wonder if some of it is kind of that manifesting, like, that's like a time of year where they feel free to express something,
yes.
that maybe they don't get to the rest of the time. That's really beautiful. I love that.
And I will say that I was just going to say this is a beautiful segue. I will say that with my neighbors. My neighbors, there are a few neighbors in my neighborhood. They go all out, right? They have crazy decorations. And but it's not like they have the same thing every year. It is sort of like a 2 month long art project that just sort of builds and builds and builds and builds. And then they have this really cool looking yard, but it's just out of a sense of joy.
Mhm,
And even though they're putting up things that are, quote, creepy, they're having so much joy in building this amazing thing that
mhm.
it's not my place to say, you're bad and wrong and evil because I think that that's true. That's literally, like you said, a reflection of my own concerns, fears, and stuff within me. And it's time for me to address that.
Yeah. And I wonder if some of that because I live in a very LDS community, and I have
Right.
some friends who are way into this, and I
Mm,
wonder if some of that, again, goes back to we're not allowed to explore the darkness a lot.
yeah.
That's a side of Judeo-Christianity that we have lost in the Western world, exploring the darkness, because part of the exploration of the darkness is exploring the other side of the veil. Again, I go into this in my book. The language is there. You have to go into the darkness to meet God. That's where God is. So I wonder if people, again, it's like this need that they're not realizing to embrace that because the darkness is the womb. The darkness is a place of recreation, rebirth. That's why the original Hebrew New Year was in the fall. As things started to die, that's when the new year was, because that's when new creation took place. Now it's in the spring, but it's a similar idea. You know, the soil, the more black a soil is, the more things that have died and that have been integrated into that soil. Listen with your spiritual ears. The more things that we let go and die that are integrated and broken down, the more new life and things that can grow from that. So darkness can be a very beautiful, sacred stillness to
Yes.
explore.
And I truly do believe that cutting off all contact with anything that's darker is the root cause of our separation from the divine feminine. That's really what it comes down to. And it's also the root cause of our separation from the earth, talking about if we're, and not just spiritually. Oh, like, oh, I'm not spiritually connected to the earth. I'm talking about we don't know where our food comes from, know where our how our waterways work. We don't even can you name your closest river? Do you know how to get there? Do you have any streams nearby? When was the last time you put your feet in that? Those kinds of things we're so disconnected from. And it all comes back to this severance of the divine feminine and saying that she doesn't exist.
Right, because the divine feminine is the physical. It
Yeah.
is, I would call it the God within. It's going within. There's like the God without, and that's in religion and that's in portrayals of Jesus and things like that. But he also says, I'm within you and you'll be in me and I'm in the Father, right? So there's this inwardness that we need to explore. And when we say think it's only spiritual, we miss half of it because it is physical. We are, I mean, again, so coming from my faith tradition, we don't believe that we're just spiritual beings just having like a physical kind of experience. It's more like, no, like coming into this body is a huge leap forward in our evolution. This body is really, it's a part of God. It is how you become more like God. So when we ignore the feelings, when we ignore the signals that our body's trying to send us, when we don't connect our body to the earth and go inward and do the meditative practices and things like that. Yeah, that is and there's a whole lot of reasons why that's the divine feminine. What's really interesting then about the fear mongering kind of around Halloween is the image of the witch, because what you will see,
Don't even
you
get me
know,
started.
I'm going to though, I'm going to get you
Yes.
started. But what I will say is, so we see these funny images of like a witch smashed into a door or something, and usually she's got like a green, kind of disfigured face, and she's got the pointy hat. And what people don't often realize is what we are doing through that imagery is perpetuating some woundedness, some misogyny, even some anti Semitism because of what happened specifically during the Renaissance and somewhat during medieval times as well, as the church was sort of cracking down on anything that wasn't in alignment with their hierarchy, with what like basically it was like the church was your conduit to God. You had to go through the church to get to God, and anything outside of that that taught anything other than that was heresy. And that's when you started having these inquisitions, and then women specifically were targeted. Women were genocided, right? So did you want to share a little bit of your understanding of that and the witch like imagery that we perpetuate?
So she has a green face. It's broken face. And if you think about bruising
Mhm.
on light skin, it turns green. So basically, what they were doing, what we're glorifying when we look at the green faced witch with the warts and the broken nose, is that we're glorifying a woman being dragged and beaten through the streets and then burned at the stake
Yeah, during the witchcraft trial era.
during the witch trials. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was not necessarily actual evil. They were healers. They owned land. It was a lot to be gained from removing these women. There was a lot to be gained. And the church at that time really took it upon themselves to, like you said, funnel all of the religion and spirituality through one place that can be profited from, because, yes, it was also about profit. That's why they were selling like salvation tickets, you know? And it was also about making people fear the land. And that was the act of severing the feminine in that area,
Mhm.
completely severing and saying, no, the feminine is not okay. The feminine is evil. Our way is right and your way is wrong. And if we don't understand this history, then we get stuck in this trap of believing that women aren't good enough, of believing that there are certain roles that are correct and other ones that are wrong. But when we understand the history, we start to unwind. This is why I feel this draw towards streams, lakes, trees. This is why I want to learn about herbs, but I've been afraid. This is why I feel like I have this missing information that I feel like I'm supposed to know. These are all reasons why women want to reconnect with the feminine. And the problem that comes in too is we've over masculinized everything and we've glorified the masculine to the point where women don't know how to be women anymore at all. And so because we're trying to compete with men, like that's a whole nother bag of worms. But
Mhm.
that it all comes down to this time during the between 1200 and 1600, when they were burning witches at the stake in Europe.
Yeah. Oh, they burned them. They even had witch hangings in America well into the 1800s.
Hmm.
But I think too, and some of this is we don't understand our history because it's presented to us in a very kind of sterile way. And
Yeah.
the woman's story, it's always his story, right? It's never
Yes.
her story. So we're missing half the story. And so I'm sorry, I keep bringing up my book, but it's all there for people who want to know because I walk through that history in the well, really in Judaism, in the Hebrew religion, you had a goddess, right? You had priestesses, you had all this, and then that got changed for various reasons. I'm going to go into this in my presentation for the Witch Wound Summit. But in Christianity, then Jesus brings it back in. There are prophetesses, there are female bishops, deacons, whatever. Like women were mostly hosting the churches out of their homes. He elevated women to the point where the surrounding, yeah, Roman and other like people, they did not like that. It was they did not like women being equal to men. They commented on it. So as the church sort of coalesces into this Roman church, you start having these people who are saying, okay, this is what the church is. And no, you can't have female bishops anymore. And no, and bodies are bad. Marriage is bad. Like sex is bad. I mean, it was just all these things. And of course, the women, we are the keepers of the physical. We literally create physical bodies, but we are that veil too between heaven and earth. A woman comes closest to death when she's giving birth to a baby. We're literally bringing them through the veil. And women tend to be more naturally spiritual. Women tend to be naturally gifted healers. That's just a thing. That's
True.
always been a thing with anybody with eyes to see. Women tend to be more spiritually minded than men. And so it was just like this crackdown on women and anything to do with any kind of spiritual power that was outside the church that wasn't like handed down through this hierarchical authority to the point where women were seen as a threat till you get to a point where they're quite literally their bodies are demonized, women are demonized. You get these books like The Witch's Hammer and the one written by King James, Demonology, and women are the focus for whatever, for various reasons, partly because they're so disconnected from women. And so then you get to the point where we have women who are beaten and bloodied and tortured. and, and now we kind of glorify that on Halloween. So if there is something maybe that I would say, maybe don't do that on Halloween. Maybe
It's the
don't
witches, yeah.
perpetuate that witch imagery. But it's fine because people have kind of made it their own and they make it cute and fun. But just know it's from this place of deep, deep woundedness and horror that took place in the Western world.
And
For
we're
people.
talking 1,000 years ago on a different continent, and we're still bringing this imagery forward. Like, it is old. It is a very old wound.
It's so
And
powerful. Yeah,
yes.
so powerful.
What are some things you think would be a good thing to celebrate Halloween? Like, how might you celebrate Halloween to help bolster that connection that we're talking about without it being, this other thing that we're afraid of?
Yeah, that's so great. That's such a great question. And so, what I've done now in the past is I have posted about ancestors or family members who have passed on that year. Once I acknowledge them, there's this TV show now. It's like The Rings of Power. It's the prequel to Lord of the Rings. And they have like this little ritual that they do. All the people they lost the past year, and they say, "We remember you. We remember you." And so I get dressed up, Dia de los Muertos. I paint my face. I do the old, thing. And I say, "We remember you." And I do tune in. I meditate. I focus on my ancestors. And I have felt things. I have gotten messages from my grandma or my grandpa or other people at that time of year. It is like a time there. Well, all year really can be like that. But, focus on them. Love them. Just, be like, is there anything you want me to know? Go to the temple if you're LDS. Do temple work for those people. It's a beautiful time and celebrate this light that is getting longer, but also darker and deeper. And just, I don't know. I just love going out in nature and just feeling it. My son, who's been dealing with his own severe things lately, said, "Mom, I actually felt fall yesterday for a little bit. I felt it," he said, "and it felt like a hug." And I just love that.
That's so beautiful. I love it. Mm. Fall does feel like a hug. I think that's why people love
Yeah.
fall. Yeah.
What about you? What do you do?
Well, I do a lot of gardening in general, but fall and this time of year is an excellent time for taking the garden down and composting it and just
Mhm,
really setting that intention of remembering that the food that fed us this year is feeding the food that feeds us next year.
mhm.
And um I have this very strange habit of accidentally growing a ton of marigolds, which is the classic flower of Dia de los Muertos.
Yeah.
And it's the flower of the ancestors in the Mexican tradition. So that's a big part of what ends up getting composted as well. And so that's kind of being fed into that too. But I also really like to connect with the land spirits because I'm, genetically a transplant. I didn't come from this land. have to make an active point to connect with the land that I live on. Also, there's a cemetery, like, right at the end of my street, so I also have to be like, "Hey, guys, what's up?" It's a fairly old cemetery, like, from the 1700. I think that's the earliest. And just recognizing, like, all of the different changes that, like, yes, it looks like where I live looks like this and that right now, but even 10 years ago, that wasn't the case. 50 years ago, it was a different type of land. 100 years ago, there were other people living on this land. Recognizing, like, where I live is really important, and the specific land I live on is really important. I have been doing ancestor conversations before my grandparents even died. It's like it's more like a natural transition
Mhm.
for that. It never really changed my relationship that much. So, because that's where I get all of my information about how do I do regular tasks on a day-to-day basis. I
Mhm.
just go, "Okay, how did they do it way back then when?" And of course, they don't know about computers and stuff, but if I'm growing something or if I'm baking something, or that's the time that I really connect because I'm like, "Well, I wanna do this in the best way possible," and
Yeah.
more than likely, they know more about that than me.
So that's such a great point because, and a lot of times people who are cool with energy work or are familiar with energy work, a lot of it is about doing ancestral work, about healing things. But what we often miss is like, actually, a lot of our ancestors were pretty awesome people who know a lot of things that we have lost that we don't know. And I'm sure they have wonderful things that they want to share with us if we're just open to intuiting that. And
Mhm.
I know that, you and Julie and Kaylee Rose, they have their school where they teach people these things. I talk about it in my book. I have other friends who are like teaching people how do I know when I'm talking to an ancestor? Like, what does it look like when I'm communing with the other side of the veil? But if you're not familiar, there are tons of resources and feel free to reach out. We can help you learn like how to do this in a good way so that all of Halloween isn't just about the weird, twisted, kind of perverted, oh, it's spooky to do that kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
'Cause it's not. It's a beautiful, healing, really, really powerful binding, sealing together of heaven and earth.
Absolutely. So, what's the name of your book, and where do people find it, first of all?
It's called All Things in One: Reuniting Religion with the Women in the Wilderness. So I have a pre-order that you can sign up for now, and it should be out very, very soon, and plenty of time to order for Christmas on Amazon and Kindle and then Audible as well.
Awesome. And then make sure you come to the Witch Wound Summit that we're hosting on Halloween. There will be 4 live speakers, and then we'll have a Q&A panel, but there's lots of pre-recorded, videos as well that will bring the whole point of the summit is twofold. Number 1, to unwind the fear around the concept of witch, which actually means wise one, and the other part is the actual reconnection. So we've got talks on uh, flower essences. We've got anointing oils. I'm going to talk about yoni eggs and crystals, but there's lots of really good talks on reconnecting and how to work with these tools. But the first thing is just like what you're talking about here, Jocelyn, and what you're going to talk about during our chat later is really honing in on why are we afraid and what's the actual words that they're using to make us afraid and where did they come from? Which I'm excited for this because it's going to be super powerful.
Yeah, we're gonna unwind the all that language in the Bible and be like, okay, so what was actually the message and what is sort of the superimposed message. So I'm excited for everybody to hear that as well. And just for people who don't know, when we talk about witch wound, I go into the linguistics of that in my book. It's the word witch is not what we think it is or what it's been made to be. And for people who don't know, the witch wound, what we're talking about is this trauma that has been handed down specifically to women for generation after generation because it was never dealt with. So, a time where women were conditioned to turn on other women, where women were taught to fear their spirituality because that could get you killed, where women were taught to fear becoming financially successful because that
Yes.
could get you killed. Like all of these things that we think we don't realize are still a part of us. But if you've ever had a woman where you feel like threatened by her in her success or where she's felt threatened by your success or things like that, if you have problems with money, if you feel like somehow you're not allowed to speak up or be spiritually powerful or lead in some way, then that's what the witch wound is about.
Exactly. Thank you. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for chatting with me. And
Yeah.
A great day, everybody. Can't wait to see you all inside the summit.
Yay.
Thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we did. Please make sure to give us a 5-star rating wherever you are listening and share with someone you know. See you next week.